Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome all of you to tonight's celebration of the first ALS unit in Montgomery County and the DC metro area, and also the first female EMT firefighter at BCCRS in Montgomery County. I want to thank all of you for attending tonight's celebration. We really appreciate it. Some of you may know that the ground we're standing on right now is the old headquarters for BCCRS. This was where the rescue squad ran out of from about 1959 to 1976 until we moved to Battery Lane. And I remember running many a call from this station, as well as I see a few others here tonight. Kenny Holden. I am president of the Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad Alumni Association and also the immediate past president of the Rescue Squad. And tonight we're presenting the Night of First. I need to send out a special thank you tonight to Suburban Hospital for being our sole sponsor for tonight's celebration. Thank you very much, Suburban Hospital. Suburban Hospital was a vital partner with Medic One in providing advanced life support care to our patients. From the consult to receiving our patients, they were an integral part of life-saving care for this community. And tonight, as we celebrate the start of advanced life support back in 1974, we also admitted the first female EMT firefighter to BCCRS. In 1974, this was a pivotal year for BCCRS as well as the county. The Cadillac ambulances were being phased out in favor of a larger type box ambulance, as the federal standard for ambulances made it almost impossible for the Cadillac to carry the equipment needed for medical care. And also in '74, the television show Emergency was the #1 show on TV. And I know many people were inspired to join the fire service from that show. Okay. The other milestone was this just passed. September 30th was the date that the first ALS units were placed in service, one at Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad and the other one at the Wheaton Volunteer Rescue Squad. And Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad, Medic One, did run the first ALS call in Montgomery County. In a moment, we're going to be hearing from 3 ladies that were pioneers in the fire and rescue service in 1974. Later on, you're going to hear from 2 of our newest paramedics and how they handled advanced life support in the 21st century. Before I go, let me ask Fire Chief Smedley, are you here? Sir, would you like to get up and give a few comments?
Good evening, everyone. This is a very historic moment. I didn't know Chief Michaels at her time here at Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad or in Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Service, but that doesn't mean I didn't know her. I knew her when I was across the river in Alexandria. She didn't allow me to get into her program twice just for no, I just wanted to say that. No, I'm just kidding. Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there's no path and leave a trail. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Chief Michaels is a trailblazer. I can tell you she's still blazing trails with the program with the International Association of Fire Chiefs to help elevate aspiring chiefs to learn how to become successful chiefs. So she's not only done it 50 years ago, she's continuing to do that work now, and I'm so proud to know you. And I can tell you, if I pick up the phone to call, she would answer. And that's another testament of the person she is. So you inspire me, and I thank you for all the work that you've done. Just a little note, the way I got into the fire service was my sister was a firefighter and EMT in Prince George's County before me, and she inspired me. So I understand your journey. And I'm so proud to know you, and thank you for all the great things that you did and continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Also in the room, I think Dr. Stone. Dr. Stone, he is the medical director for Montgomery County, and he has a few words to say.
So I apologize, I didn't have anything prepared ahead of time, so it's impromptu. So I thought I would speak from the heart as well as from the head. So in addition to me being beyond honored to be here in my capacity as the medical director, this milestone evening has special meaning for me as a kid growing up in Bethesda. So for those, I've shared this with some of the folks in the room that I met individually or saw individually, but the genesis of EMS in Montgomery County and in Maryland was contemporary with my having also fallen in love with the television show Emergency, and there was something about acute care and helping people with instant needs that seemed to have attracted me. And my parents, who were, career scientists at NIH, were a little bit intrigued by this interest because it was something that was a little different than the other two brothers. And so my parents watched Emergency over my shoulder, and they said, "This is really cool stuff. What Johnny and Roy are doing, this early paramedicine activity in Miami and in Los Angeles." So they took me to the unveiling of Medic 1 in front of Fire Station 6, when Station 6 was like less than 5 years old there at Battery and Wisconsin Avenue. And so I got a chance to see the first introduction of it as at literally maybe pushing 10-year-old. And so thinking about the fact that this evening is happening, 50 years later, it has special meaning, and so I'm beyond pumped to be here. It's not just honored, but pumped. I think of, so my mom, I'll share with you, said, Roger, this Johnny Roy stuff is really great stuff, but have you ever thought about being Dr. Brackett? And I have to say, fast forward 30-some years and I'm living a dream, right? And that is the ability to be involved in organized emergency medical services at the physician level. But they weren't going to deny me some pre-hospital time. After we moved a little bit north of here to Mount Airy, I did become a Maryland EMT, and I was able to ride during college and medical school for about 12 years. So I got a taste at the basic life support level to actually get in the street, and it was a very good corollary to becoming an emergency physician, and then some years later, an EMS physician, which is our newest subspecialty. And so I wanted to share that with you because it gives perspective on just how important this night is for me personally. Now, I have to say something about my mom, almost well up. Imagine being a graduate of Cornell Sloan Kettering in 1959 as a female scientist, right? It was a pretty male-dominated field back then. And so we watched, as my brothers and I, she raised 3 boys, right? We watched her having to often work twice as hard to get as much or even half the recognition in a male-dominated world. So she essentially raised 3 feminist boys. So the fact that we are celebrating also the milestone of the first female member of the rescue squad has additionally special meaning for me because my mom, she dragged her oxygen concentrator at age 83 into the NIH lab, and we had to drag her kicking and screaming to get her to retire as the 3rd longest serving female scientist in NIH history. So I thought that would really be an explanation about just how important the night is for me to be here, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am. Now, on one more thing about the medicine. The unveiling of Medic 1 was the genesis of organized advanced life support in Maryland, alongside the city of Baltimore, which was working on paramedics around the same time, in the shadow of Miami and Los Angeles and some other cities that were getting it. But what was going on in Montgomery County when ALS was first introduced was real cutting-edge medicine for its time back in 1973. And parallel to the genesis here in Montgomery County, Maryland was also working on a statewide system of emergency medical services. And so the partnership was a little bit more segregated in the beginning because they had medical oversight by committee. You were talking about Dr. Farney and surgeons at Suburban that were part of a committee that would give us our formulary. And our formulary here in Montgomery County was actually quite advanced, including steroid medications for asthma, which we didn't get at the state until many years later. So we were cutting edge back then, and I wanted to mention that is because all these 50 years later, and something I'm honored to be a part of, waking up every day, is to see the efforts that we're making now to stay on the cutting edge. You may have heard that we have whole blood on the ground EMS system here, which is almost like the Narcan of bleeding to death. And we're constantly looking for ways to stay current with what the evidence says is the best medicine to bring to the bedside for patients. And so we are trying to do it now. The paramedics that are with us today, the night crew paramedics that are working tonight, know about this. And we did it back then 50 years ago, thanks to all your leadership. And so I appreciate you letting me share my story with you, and I look forward to just a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. There are a few other VIPs that have attended here. I'll just run real quick over a few. I have Becky Kane and I have Leslie Weber from Suburban Hospital. Thank you all for sponsoring this and coming tonight. Thank you. Delegate Jared Solomon, are you here? He indicated he was attending. Here's one for you. Dr. Peter Farney. If you all remember Dr. Farney, I dropped many a patient off with you, Doctor. We also have Dr. Tim Shizmar from IMS is here also. Thank you, Doctor. And Dave Dwyer is here, former chief for many, many years. Thank you, Dave. And if I missed you, I apologize. So let's keep moving on. Next, I am proud to announce that we do have two wonderful MCs for tonight. They are well known in this area. You've heard them, you've seen them, you know who they are. I'm speaking about Dave Statter and his wife Hillary Howard. Thank you very much, and I am going to turn the night over to these two. Thank you.
Hi guys, how you doing?
It's really a pleasure to be here. Can you all hear me okay? I'm Dave, that's Hillary, if you haven't figured it out. Somehow I think you've all figured that out. This looks like just a phenomenal evening to be here. You're happy to be here, right?
Very happy to be here.
You know, my open was kind of related to what you've already heard, which is 1972. This TV show that we've never seen anything quite like for people of a certain age, with lots of lights and sirens. There we go. Lots of lights and sirens that attracted people. But, you know, as you can hear from Dr. Stone, Ken, and you could hear from probably a lot of others who have gray hair, that, including me, that's how they got attracted to fire and EMS. Particularly EMS work in that era. And certainly a generation of providers were informed by that show with the language that was all new to everybody. We hear on there, 51, administer 2 amp sodium bipart, and insert an esophageal airway stat, start an IV, lactate ringers, start an IV with D5W-TKO, Rampart, patient is at B-Fib. It was all new language that we had not heard. And it informed us. It wasn't a part of EMS here in 1972. There was EMS, there was fire-based EMS in Montgomery County, and Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad had been providing EMS for decades and doing a very good job of it. But this was something new. A little bit foreign on the East Coast. You heard Dr. Stone talk about where it was. One place we should mention where it was in a neighborhood in Pittsburgh, an African-American neighborhood which had Freedom House ambulance service, which provided really the first paramedics around it. It's not a well-known story to the public, but there is a documentary out there if you ever get a chance to hear it. But what's important is that there were a lot of forward-thinking people who, whether they saw it from emergency or took it upon themselves in fire and EMS already, to look at what was going on elsewhere in the country, they learned about the paramedic services, and they were starting to say, how do we bring it here? Now, once emergency went on the air, the public knew about it, and the politicians knew about it. Suddenly, there was a little more pressure. Why don't we have that here? Well, Montgomery County, BCC, answered that in a big way. And now here we are, 50 years later, the anniversary of the Medic One program.
And that's not the only first we're celebrating tonight. Of course, we're honoring these extraordinary pioneers of the paramedic program, and they're all women, which is really, really cool. Shall I wait? Oh, there we go. And I would like to acknowledge, as a woman, that it must be really difficult to walk into a boys' club and have to eventually hope to win the respect of your peers. That can be tough. You know, it's not easy. It's never been easy. Back in the 1980s, I worked at Winds Radio in New York, and we had an editor named Marge Mealy. Now, Marge Mealy was a reporter in the New York Daily News. I'm talking late 1940s, early 1950s. And she was one of very, very few women who were working in that newsroom. So she said one day as a boss came over, now this boss had a problem with the women because they were emotionally variable from his perspective. So he got this like a little group of women together, and he had a conversation with them, and then he pulled out a calendar and marked down when each of those women would be having their periods so he could know when to expect the unexpected. I am not suggesting that that has happened to you guys, but it's difficult, you know, it's just really not an easy thing to do. I do imagine ultimately the personal reward after having to walk through a little bit of that fire, and I'm sure that you all have little different stories, not as necessarily crazy as Marge's, but to show up every day, to be committed, to do the work, and then to finally have the respect and trust of all of those doubters must be a phenomenal feeling, because then everybody sees you on equal footing, right? And that's a value add. It's a value add that women do it differently. I can't say that women do it better, but I can say that women do it differently. And that brings something to not just fire EMS or policing, but to everything, I think. And with that, did you want to say something?
Yeah, imagine these women coming into a place where there are no real role models as women. Nobody to look at, even on the show Emergency. With, I think, one exception of one episode, no women ran Squad 51 or on Engine 51 or were on the private ambulances that came to pick up the patients. It was all men. In the hospital, the doctors were all men. The only role, really, for women was the traditional role of being nurses. And I can tell you, and that's not to belittle nurses, in fact, from my experience in the first class of cardiac rescue technicians in Prince George's County, I learned more from the nurses than from the doctors. No offense, Dr. Stone. I mean, the nurses taught me well at Prince George's Hospital Center. And the thing is, when you look at these three women, two of them started in the nursing field.
Well, shall we talk to them?
Okay, well, let me just give you a quick introduction. Here's Willa Little Gratz, right? I get the name right for once, you know. Trying to say all three names at once is a little tough for me. Who was the lead instructor of the paramedic program. You've already heard about Chief Mary Beth Mikos, who was the founder of the paramedic program. And the first female rescue squad member was Marianne Vivret. And let's just give them a round of applause for being here and taking the time.
All right, so we have questions for you, ladies. And we'll begin with you, Chief Mary Beth, if you don't mind. So a little more history on Mary Beth. She was a registered nurse, and then she was the head nurse of one of the country's first mobile coronary care units. As Dave mentioned, she developed Maryland's first training program, the paramedic program, fell in love with fire and EMS, became an EMS officer here in Montgomery County, and then an assistant chief. Then you were fire chief in Prince William. You skipped across the river. And you were fire chief in Prince William County. 12 years. In 2003, you were IAFC's Career Chief of the Year, which is a pretty extraordinary achievement. Now, you've kind of retired. Kind of retired, right? Now, you've helped to develop the Fire Service Executive Development Initiative. So, not only that, I mean, the accolades go on and on and on, but you're studying a postdoc, right? Or your doctoral.
Well, hopefully someday I'll finish the dissertation and get my PhD.
There you go. All right. So, you know, you did start the Montgomery County paramedic program. And I'm just curious what the catalyst was to start that. What, was there an event? Was it just time? What was it?
Well, it really was my experience as head nurse of the first mobile coronary care unit that really got me on this road to becoming part of to start the paramedic program and then being in the fire service. And back in the late 60s, we were really now you all realize I was just out of kindergarten then. I was on the Heart Association's board of directors when they got a federal grant to start a mobile program to test the validity of actually taking advanced life support to people where they happen to be stricken outside the hospital, rather than packaging them and going that 20 miles or however it happened to be to one of the hospitals and being treated there, because time is of essence with heart attack patients, with trauma patients. So we learned a lot from the Heartmobile, and it was in service for about 2 years before we lost the federal funding. Federal funding seems to dry up sometimes real fast. And during that time, we learned that, first of all, you could treat more than just heart attack patients on these units. That you could, anybody that was critical, who was having trouble breathing, was unconscious, had trauma, that you could go and provide them with life-saving care too. So that was one of the important factors. We also learned that you didn't really need registered nurses and certified technicians from hospitals out in the field. We were used to patients being brought to us with a tentative diagnosis, not going out into the field, working in somebody's bathroom when they fell on the floor or in a car accident, whatever it happened to be. What we did was we learned a lot from the firefighters who were driving our units, how we need to function out in the field. We also learned that those people from the rescue squad and the firefighters that were driving the units were learning on their own how to read the EKGs, and they were really adept at learning these skills that we were doing as nurses without us actually sitting down and training them. So that kind of stimulated us one night, and when the unit went out of service, to go over to the TikTok Lounge in Prince George's County.
An infamous lounge.
The infamous lounge.
Chief Smedley and I were just talking about that.
With all of my nursing books, and we sat there and put together a program to actually train the people and to give them the training that we knew they would be really good at, and they were. And with that night, we thought of what do we call these people, because paramedic wasn't, or emergency wasn't on the TV yet. I mean, there was nothing in this area that we had to go with. So we created and innovated a lot of things. So we called them cardiac rescue technicians, and that name stayed within the certification processes for several decades until that term and that level of training was kind of phased out. So that's how it started. And when the Heart Association ran out of money for us to do the training, and our first 3 classes that we taught were taught at the Montgomery County Heart Association, which just so happened to be above a donut shop here in Bethesda. And it was only with the volunteers from the BCC Rescue Squad and the Wheaton Rescue Squad during those initial programs. And they were all men because we didn't have any women in the rescue squads and with the fire departments at that time. So it was purely all men taking this training. And then the county decided, when the Heart Association knew that they couldn't support the program long enough, the county government decided to take it over and to create an EMS division within the Department of Fire Rescue, and they hired me on a temporary position for a year to set up the program and to get a training program going. And then I was planning to go back to nursing, but as you said, I just fell in love with the fire service and decided that's where I wanted to spend the rest of my career. So that's kind of how it started. And by that time, emergency
Was on TV.
was on TV. So when people said, "What is this you're doing?" we could say, "Well, watch on Saturday nights it was
Yeah,
on," or
yeah.
something, and refer people to that show. The only difference was everybody survived on emergency.
Yeah, that's true. Pretty much, yeah, that's true.
And we tried real hard, but once in a while,
Yeah.
there was a different outcome.
Pass your mic to Willa for a second. Also a nurse,
Yes,
and both at Bryn Mawr and York hospitals. And then you played a pivotal role in developing and implementing training programs for EMTs and paramedics. You did similarly, not just here, but around the world.
I did. I was fortunate to have an opportunity to travel to some areas, and I did some training in Mexico and Singapore. I went to South Africa one year, and this was in the early 70s, and the sisters, which is what they call their nurses, were having difficulty with the paramedics doing these procedures in the field, which was the same thing that happened in this country when paramedics started. The nurses didn't like the paramedics doing intubations, starting IVs, when they weren't able to do them in some of the hospitals. And so I was meeting with the sisters and told them our experience in this country and how fortunate it was and how good the patients were when they were arriving at the hospital. So they had a much better outcome because they were getting the treatment earlier.
Talk about locally, that was going to be my next question anyway, and you touched on it. What was the reaction locally here in both the medical community, the positive and the negative that you got?
Well, again, in the beginning, they were unsure about the paramedics out there doing these skills because they felt they didn't have as much education as the nurses and physicians had. They felt that they needed more education, and we tried to explain to them and show them just how much. We would get the nurses to ride on the units with the paramedics so they could see them doing the procedures in the conditions that they had to work. And they understood a lot more, and watching them do the procedures, they understood that they really were able to do these techniques very skillfully out in the field.
Great. Go ahead.
All right, finally, Marianne Vivrette, good to see you. So, Marianne joined BCC Rescue back in 1974, as we've established, that's 50 years ago. An EMT, among the first 911 call takers here in the county, the first woman member of BCC Rescue. That's quite an accomplishment. After 3 years, you became a deputy sheriff, Gaithersburg Police. You were there for 28 years, 21 years as chief, and you were the first woman police chief in Maryland. So a lot of incredible experiences. And, you served as president of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, too. There's more. Degrees in law enforcement, human resources management, graduate of the FBI Academy, and many, many other notable accolades. But first, madam, a question. I'm really curious about the fact that you've worked both sides of the fence in public safety, right? Fire EMS and policing. Was there anything on the fire side that helped inform you as a chief of police?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a lot of similarities. In the early years, the adrenaline rush and, anybody that's heard the alert tone go off for police or a fire call, the excitement, and then if it gets in your blood, that's all you want to do. So it's very similar in police. I really could have gone either track. It just so happened that 911 was starting, and I was 19-year-old, and $3,000 full-time job sounded pretty good, so I took it. So that just ended up pushing me toward the police side. But I think I was talking to Dave Dwyer. He was the chief when I was an early member, and we talked about the camaraderie, and it's similar in police and fire. So I think there's more similarities than differences. Most people, when they call for an ambulance or rescue, they want help, and when they call police, not so much. So it results in a different outcome. So I'm kind of jealous when I meet these young paramedics. I kind of wish I had the opportunity to do it all over again on the other track. But, you can't look back. I'm happy with how it all worked out.
Let me ask you, because there's always a little friction between the fire side and the police side, right? That exists. But you talked about the similarities. What are the similarities, and are there ways perhaps to resolve some of that tension?
So I think that comes down to leadership. If the leaders of a fire department or a police department are fighting about something, whether it's political or whether it's on the scene, then that goes down into the officers and the firefighters that see each other on calls. So I think it has to be stopped at leadership at the top and addressed by communication and proper protocols. If that's happening, then I would blame it on leadership.
I don't know who wants to answer this, but Hillary touched on it. And you also talked about how you had to prove yourself as paramedics to the medical community. How did you have to prove yourself at women, and what obstacles were there? Being the first rescue squad member, having the double thing to prove that we can do this as paramedics and that we're also women doing it. Pass the hot potato right over there, right? I understand that. Either one. We got all three of you.
Everybody.
So for me, I think it was easy. I mean, it was almost embarrassing that there was all that attention, because I think when you want to do a job like that, especially women in law enforcement too, you just want to be accepted. And I was here, and again, it's back to leadership. Talking to Dave, he's probably got more heat about hiring me than I did. I just ran the calls and wanted to be one of the guys, and I'm sure.
Before you answer, it's just to set some historical perspective. Across the river in Arlington County, the first woman firefighter, apparently career firefighter in the country, Judy Brewer, there were pickets at her firehouse by the wives of the firefighters did not want her sleeping in that firehouse. That's what it was like back then. But go ahead, Mary Beth. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
The same thing happened here. When we had the Heartmobile, we had to move to a fire station for the winter. So we went to Silver Spring, and I guess I was there 2 or 3 days on duty in the unit, and when we stayed at night, I just sat down, I just slept on the sofa in the day room. But Chief Gratz, who was chief at Silver Spring at the time, called me up to the office to show me all the letters he got from the wives about a woman sleeping in the fire station. So, and initially there wasn't, we were more accepted as women because we were nurses and we were emergency medical services, and that was very new. I know myself, I didn't get any really big kickback until I was assigned to run the fire training academy, and the headlines in one of the local newspapers was, "Can a nurse run a fire school?"
Wow.
But it didn't say can a woman, it did say can a nurse.
A nurse.
Yeah,
But
that's
the inference was there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because most,
And I'll tell you, at one point I was training officer at the training academy, the fire school, and they transferred a woman police officer out there to run the police academy, and that place hummed.
I bet it did. I bet it did.
We were able to really work a lot better than I think any of us did with previous people out there, but that one was
So
good.
let me kind of follow with you, Willa. What do you think women lent at the beginning that perhaps wasn't there, if anything?
Well, I think women lend a bit of, trying to think of the word, compassion. And I know one thing that I did with the training, not everyone that goes through the training program is able to get the knowledge from their brain to their hands. And as much as they want to become a paramedic, sometimes we just are not able to allow them to go into the field and function. And there was this compassion, I think, that we brought to the program of helping them realize that they can't do the work and allowing them to save face and leave the program on their own terms. So I think that compassion comes out. And we use that every day with the firefighters out there in the area as well. So I think it's the great compassion that we bring.
Before we, go ahead.
But does it make it just a little softer then?
Yes, it does. It does. It makes it a lot softer. And I think they appreciate it, even though sometimes they won't admit it, but I think they appreciate it.
Yeah.
Before we bring our next two guests up, which we'll talk more about today, when you look back, particularly you two with the paramedic program, what do you see of its accomplishments? Has it grown the way you saw it would grow? Is it met your expectations, gone beyond? Where do you see it looking at it today?
Oh, I am very pleased with the way it has grown. Starting out as the CRTs with what they were able to do, and now what they're able to do as EMT paramedics, it's amazing. And with the new, with the drugs they're carrying, with blood that they're carrying, I mean, they're able to really provide great service to the patients and be able to save many of the patients. So I think it has really grown in a great way. How about you?
Well, I agree with that, but one thing I do want to say, while we're up here getting recognition for this, the true heroes of this whole thing were the paramedics that we trained back then. Because we asked them to come and take training at a time where we could not assure them that they would ever get to use that. Because there was no method. When we started, for years, there was no system of testing them to get that legal coverage for them to go out and do the things that we were training them to do. The first tests weren't given until the end of 72, 73, and we had been training since 69. So those people came and took that training, again, just wanting to do better, wanting to go save lives, and then eventually they were able to go on. And the other thing is, the fire service played really the key role in it, but it really took a county to make that program. The medical society, it took a while to convince them, but we did have a whole bunch of physician champions who convinced their peers to back the program, to work with the state medical society to make sure that there'd be some kind of test that they could take so they could finally practice. We worked with the state system, again, the physicians were involved in that, trying to get the Maryland Institutes of EMS to work with us and include us as part of the state EMS system. So there were a lot of players, and we were very fortunate to be able to play our roles in that, but there were a lot of people.
Well, let's bring up our next two guests. Ladies, if you would join us. We have Lana Sahadzik and Eve Hill, both current members of the squad, who very active members who we've hosted the banquets the last couple of years, hearing about them, their antics quite a bit. You two can share that one if you don't mind, and we'll just pass it down, and maybe you three can share this one. You have start with Lana?
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on, let me get. I have all the notes on all of your successes.
She's done all the research. She has your background. Watch her.
Okay. So here's the deal on Yana. She knew as a kid, well, you knew as a kid you wanted this life, right?
Guess so.
Pretty much. And you joined BCC as a high school student in 2017. At 19, she completed the county's paramedic program and dove into work during COVID. You've risen to the rank of captain and night crew officer, 3-time paramedic of the year winner, and you chair the EMS Policy and Advanced Training Committee. It's amazing. So, there's more. Again, BA in Neurobiology and Physiology from Maryland that you got during COVID. You're working on a master's at Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. All right. So I'm so curious, I say that a lot, but I'm a curious person. What it must have been like to jump in the middle of COVID as a young person.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm honored to be here. Thank you guys for having me. COVID was hard for everyone. I mean, it was more scary, I think, for us as medical professionals, kind of not knowing what we're getting ourselves into. Being a new provider, a new paramedic, not knowing, I'm young and still kind of getting the experience that I need, and am I comfortable with the skills that I've learned and gone through, but, not having some of the same support that we had prior to COVID, things were a lot different, and just not knowing what the next day, what the next week and month was going to look like, what COVID was going to do to the community. So it was scary, but I think it also was kind of inspiring to keep going and keep coming back. I was looking forward to learning something new every time I came in, and I think at the end of the day, I learned that the experiences and the training that I did get were everything that I needed to be successful. And
I would just love to follow on that. So you jump into the fire, right? I guess you don't even have a chance to catch your breath. You're just running and you're doing the work. But did it change the way, how do you think it shaped you? Because clearly people come up at a different time. They didn't have that experience. How do you think that shaped you and perhaps made you different?
I think in some ways it made me even a little bit more compassionate. We were dealing with really tough situations, meaning that we had to tell that these loved ones couldn't come to the hospital with the patients, right? Could be the last time that they're seeing them. And, it was a lot more stress to kind of take on, dealing and taking these people to the hospital, not knowing what was going to happen because we didn't know what was going to happen with COVID. So I think it made me even more compassionate to the family and to the patients, doing just little things that made them feel more comfortable, and if they needed a couple extra seconds on scene to, get what they needed, say their goodbyes with their families, and just overall more compassion.
Eve Hill, this is your life now. Eve joined the rescue squad in 2018 as the member of the Thursday night crew. In 2021, she attended the Montgomery County ALS program, where she was recognized as Paramedic Student of the Year. This year, she graduated from a paramedic to RN bridge program and now working as a registered nurse at MedStar, Washington Hospital Center, Trauma and Burn Center in the ICU, and I've met previous life many burn center nurses, and it really is, they're amazing. And there's something special about them. I'm not sure what it is, but you have to be to do that kind of work, and I admire that. And you continue to volunteer weekly as a paramedic and EMS driver at BCCRS. You've heard these three women talk here tonight. What do you see about what they went through, your experiences now, maybe even admiration for them? I'd love to hear it in your words.
Well, thank you so much for having me tonight. It's an honor just to sit here with these three very inspiring women. I've been so lucky at the rescue squad. Because of their trailblazing, I've had so many excellent female role models. I've had Yana as a night crew officer and other females who are here in the room tonight. And to sit here and hear the experience, it's especially interesting to me as a registered nurse to hear about how this program kind of came about through nurses, and hearing that story that you told about how your headline was, "Can a nurse run the fire academy?" is so interesting, because actually when I went through the Montgomery County Paramedic Academy, a nurse was very highly involved in our training, and I think the crossover between what we do in the field and what we do in the hospital, and even the law enforcement side, we work so closely with them. Really, it's all an overarching public safety, and women can play a role in all areas of that. We work with amazing female physicians in the ER. We work with amazing female police officers and firefighters out here in the streets, and it's just an honor to sit next to these inspiring women.
It's come a long way. It's really interesting. Do you think you're over many of the barriers that are they far behind, do you think, or do you still deal with some of it?
I think Rescue 1 and BCCRS is a very special place. We have a very high proportion of female members. Doing my paramedic residency in Montgomery County, I was assigned to a career fire station where there was actually only one female firefighter in the station besides me, so I was kind of a novelty to all of the career firemen there. Going through the program as a 19-year-old, as the youngest paramedic in the county, I know Yana had a very similar experience. We were going into the fire station with all these career firemen, and they were kind of like, whoa, here's this like young girl that's just excited to be here and excited to learn, but they were all very welcoming, and I credit the leadership in Montgomery County for making it such a welcoming space for us.
It's wonderful. Mary Beth, listening to them, as a former chief, as somebody who was at the very early stages, was pioneer in this program here in Montgomery County, and what do you see for the future? Hold on, let's get you a mic. Somebody.
Well, if you watch now what's happening in medicine, I think we're going to be playing a bigger role because patients aren't going and staying in hospitals. They're using more physicians' extenders because there just aren't enough physicians to go around. But I know in other parts of the country that the fire departments are combining with police departments to go out and take care of mental health issues. And they're talking now about actually having patients who normally would go to a coronary care unit being at the house and getting treatment via telemetry, but there's a need for caregivers to come and check on them. So our role, I think, is just expanding tremendously in different parts of the country. And we here, and I'm sure Chief Smedley is watching to see what should be our next step here. What are the needs of the community?
It must be beautiful to have planted these seeds 50 years ago and to have watched them grow and blossom and bear fruit.
All three of you. I mean,
Yeah.
It's got to be.
We've all been surprised, I think.
Tell us your thoughts.
Pleasantly.
Willa, tell us your thoughts a little bit about that.
I've been pleasantly surprised by what has happened with the program. And it's nice to see some of the people that have come back to greet me when I see them in the stores and that. But I agree that the role of the paramedic is going to expand. In many cases, as Mary Beth said, there's not enough other caregivers that the paramedics are going to be giving patient care, take the role of the doctor in some cases, the first provider, and take care of the patients and provide what the patient needs by sending telemetry. And so I think the role of the paramedic is really going to expand considerably.
All of you, in a way, the discussion has touched on it, and Chief and I were talking beforehand, the mental health issues. And we've heard so much in the news how they impact policing. They impact EMS too in a big way, I imagine. Chief, you want to say a few words about it?
Yeah, so we're really learning a lot about crisis intervention and response, and the co-responder model is really taken off around the country, and training is so important. For years, if you saw somebody with a knife, you screamed at them to put the knife down, and eventually the person that called for help for their family member that was in a mental health crisis ended up having them shot and dead when they called for help. So Now we're really teaching more about distance, cover, slowing it down.
De-escalation.
Speaking quieter. So, you know, when you think back of the 50 years, how we used to ride on the back of Rescue 19 holding the bar and hoping we didn't fall off. Same thing with policing. We're policing smarter, and it's saving lives in another way.
But isn't a tangential problem the fact that there are no beds for people? You know, like, so firefighters respond to a call, and there's no bed. Police respond to a call, a mental illness call.
I've
and
heard,
there's no bed for them.
on that, I've heard many times on
Wind
the
up in
radio.
the jail.
Radio EMS units trying to find a hospital that will accept somebody who has an issue, psychological issues of some sort, that they don't have beds. I hear that all the time. Is that your experience at times? Or is it different?
I mean, there's a need for a lot more paramedics, nurses, a lot of people to work in healthcare. I think you can see, especially post-COVID, the stress that it's put on the healthcare system, where we are waiting hours and hours for a bed at the hospital, trying to find a hospital that doesn't have a very long wait time and that can take care of a patient more promptly. But I think in general, a lot of the things that we've implemented in the past couple years in Montgomery County specifically too has helped kind of mitigate some of those issues and trying to find the best hospital and the quickest way to get there, and not having some of our units stay in line for hours and hours and put us back on the field and in the streets. But I don't know, you.
I guess when we're discussing also the wait times and the mental health crisis for patients, you have to also consider the toll that COVID put on the providers.
Right.
And you see so many nurses leaving bedside because the pay isn't good and the patient ratios were so hard during the COVID years, and even in a post-COVID world, nurses and paramedics are really being asked to bear the burden of a healthcare system that kind of met with a failure. And so addressing the mental health burden on the first responders and on the healthcare provider, it definitely is also a consideration when thinking about how we can make it better for patients.
We had a discussion about that before coming here. I want to ask you, Chief Michaels, if you could pass the mic down to her. Isn't that one of the biggest problems, the post-pandemic, in public safety in general, in policing, in fire and EMS, in 911, and that not as many people seem to be as interested in doing this work, or they've lost a lot of people who said, this isn't for me after the pandemic?
That's very true. Years ago, when we had openings in EMS and the fire service, we would get hundreds of applications. And now we're lucky if we get enough to fill the vacancies that we have. And there, going back to the mental health issue, there really is a severe crisis, in, not only here in this area, but nationwide, that we just don't have the facilities. I know in Prince William now, they're opening up a crisis center where people could go for 24, 48 hours till they're over the acute crisis, but they're going to have less than 100 beds, and we need several hundred, studies have shown. So we have to work there to try and help with that.
A few years ago now, I did a story with the sheriff in Arlington County, and she said the jail had become a de facto mental health hospital, because there were just no beds.
I was in the emergency room last fall, and there were 3 police officers having to stay there, taken off the street to stay with mental health patients having mental health crisis.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the center we're building will relieve that, but and I'm not sure what's going on in here in Montgomery County, but it seems to be a widespread problem that we're facing.
Chief, what you already said, I'm not going to ask you the question, you've already answered it. What you might want to have done differently if you had the opportunity in moving more into the paramedic side, I think you said earlier. Anything either of you two would have done differently, now that you look back on it?
As far as our careers?
Yeah.
I know that when I first started working with the fire rescue service, there was a nursing shortage, and I said to my husband, I really feel guilty. I should go back into the hospital and work, and he said, okay, how many people can you save when you're working in the hospital at a time? And I said, well, it's really difficult because I can give medications, I can defibrillate the patients, so I can save people, and so I can't really tell you. But I said, okay, maybe 1 or 2 a month. He said, how many people can you save training 25 paramedics? And of course, he made his point that you can save a lot more patients. So I would not have changed my career at all. I come from a fire family, and my mother always wanted to be a nurse. So I guess those were all instilled in me when I was small. But I loved my career. It was a little difficult getting in when I first started training the paramedics because, oh, she's a nurse. She doesn't know how to deal with the pre-hospital setting. And it took a little while till I showed them that I could function in the medic units. And each day they were always trying to think of questions that would stump me. So I had to do a lot of studying to make sure I was ahead of them. So, but they really were, all of the classes were a great group of guys, and I would never have changed my career. I loved what I did. I really do.
So before we wrap this up, I would love to ask you guys, Yana and Eve, having heard from these remarkable women, what you aspire to, you know?
I think I can really speak to like the training aspect. I look forward to having the opportunity to hopefully train a lot of people in the future, and I think it's a special kind of moment to be able to train with someone and, you know, practice together and then do the skills on a call, and then a couple years later you see them training 10 new people, and then, you know, that multiplies. So I look forward to, you know, learning a lot more and then hopefully continuing participating in training. So
Hearing from the chief about her career, just the fields that she combined is pretty inspiring to me. Getting my nursing training coming from a paramedic background and trying to prove to the nurses that I know how to function as a nurse when I come from a very pre-hospital setting where I'm used to not asking for orders and just doing things the way I want to do them, and sometimes a little bit of a cowboy medicine. But what you've
Dr. Stone's right over there.
what you've been able to do combining fields and across different counties is very inspiring, and I would love to see how I can do the same and kind of bring pre-hospital and hospital providers together and pass knowledge across both sides.
But it's really it has really evolved in a way. You talked about the whole blood. I mean, the fact even that you can call a cardiac arrest in the field now, you couldn't think of doing that probably back then. Yeah, you would have, why don't you pass one up here? You would have to go to the hospital no matter what. You started CPR, you were headed on. Talk about that, one of you two.
Well, as you said, we weren't allowed to discontinue. There were a lot of things, we still had limitations. And it just, all these changes that we've seen up to now have been gradual changes that people have become more aware of the capabilities of these people. And one thing that we haven't mentioned here tonight, I've told you how I love the fire service, but the fire service is 70 to 80% emergency medical services. In all parts of the country that the fire service delivers from basic up through and advanced. So it's kind of doing what we love to do.
Chief Smedley and I were talking ahead of time, and we were talking about our friend Chief Donnelly in the District of Columbia, who often speaks to the community and says, we are the second largest provider of medical care in the District of Columbia. And that's an important thing to think about, that you do that. And to think that it started with what you did, being an early member of the rescue squad, and you two starting, the early days of a paramedic program, and pushing a little bit, pulling when you have to, and knowing how to do it. What were the politics internally and externally around that?
I don't think we want to go there, but,
It might take a
I'll
long.
tell you.
Give it briefly, because we're going to have to wrap
Yeah.
up in a minute or two.
At one time, when the American Heart Association had a program called Advanced Life Support, Will and I wanted to get certified as instructors, again, so we could do it with the paramedics. And the physicians in the area wouldn't let us into the program. And so finally, there were 2 physicians from Virginia said, we'll give up our spots for them to take that.
Wow.
And we passed, and a lot of doctors didn't.
You're right. Of course we did.
Is there anything you didn't get to say you really want to, any of you, because we're going to wrap up here in a second?
I just like to say that women need to see other women in non-traditional roles, and these type of jobs are still, police and fire are still considered non-traditional roles. So when Eve said that you have a lot of women here in BCC, that's really important. It makes for a more welcoming environment when you're recruiting. Same with law enforcement. When I was a chief, I was constantly asking women, and they never even thought of it if they didn't have a family member. So it's important, and also to see them in leadership roles, to know that they can aspire to that. So,
Anybody else have any parting?
Yeah, I think also just empowering each other, having these discussions. This week I saw Fairfax County is hosting a women's health seminar. I think, the opportunity for networking and having the discussions with each other and encouraging ourselves to give each other the confidence that we can do it just as well.
Nice.
You want to wrap up from your end?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing these stories, for sharing the history of where you were, what it took, how you did it, and seeing its successes, and to you guys for being in the grind, for making it happen, for making life better for people, for saving lives, for having ideas on how you can continue to do that and spread the wealth.
It's very informative to a lot of people what the realities were in the early days, what the realities are now. This is a wonderful event. There needs to be more like it. Thanks, Dr. Stone, Chief Smedley, for coming up earlier. Thanks to Suburban Hospital for being behind this. It's important. Thank them also for your new hip that you got a few years ago.
Yeah.
Suburban.
Thank you, Suburban. My hip works. Woo!
Is anybody else coming up?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Jennison. I'm the president of the Rescue Squad, and I just wanted to say a few things to wrap up the evening. The first is, and folks who have been to our awards banquets have heard me say this before, but I never watched Emergency. But when I was a kid, I watched a lot of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And there's a Mr. Rogers quote that I love as a kid and still love, which is when I was a boy and I would watch the evening news, my mom would tell me to look for the helpers. There are always helpers. And what I've said in the past at the awards ceremonies is everybody in the room at the awards ceremonies are the helpers that Mr. Rogers is talking about. Everyone here are those helpers too. Whether you're a responder, a nurse, somebody who supported that community, I want to thank you all for being here and supporting the Rescue Squad and breaking the barriers that have been broken as well. And the second thing I want to say is I am kind of a lapsed responder. I keep my certifications up. I need to get back into it. I was getting heckled tonight by Yana and by Eve to come back to Thursday night. I joined the Rescue Squad in 2016, just before they did, and rode on Thursday night with them. And I stopped riding in large part because I have a 5-year-old daughter. When my daughter was born, I couldn't juggle the schedule of that and being a lawyer and whatnot. But my daughter comes by the Rescue Squad a lot. Her name is Ruth, and she looks up to the role models that are up here and wants to be a member of the Rescue Squad. So, I want to thank you all again for everything you have done to break the barriers for her as well. I want to thank a couple other people for the evening. We have a committee that put together this event, so when I say your names, if you can raise your hands, although I think everyone in here probably knows you. We have Kenny, first off, Kenny Holden. Kenny, thank you. Dave Chaconis, Dave, thank you. Todd and Miriam, thank you so much for the work that you all put into this evening. I want to thank our sponsor, Suburban Hospital, as well again, because we can do this without your support. I want to thank Chief Smedley for being here and for everyone else for being in attendance as well.